أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته شيخ.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته شيخ.
Was the audio yet?
Yes, Sheikh.
And could anybody identify what the qira'ah was? Abdullah?
The Qira'ah Ibn Kathir, he recited with Sila on his Ha'ul Kinaya, and he recited with Qasr on his Maddul Munfasil.
Okay, so the first part you mentioned, the Sila of the Ha'ul Kinaya. Can you maybe recall one word in the surah where that is applied?
يؤتيه.
Correct. At the end, yu'tihi instead of yu'tihi. So the lesson we did last week was that you have the ha'ul kinaya. If it is followed by a sukoon, then none of the qurra will make sila in it. None of them will pull it. So therefore, you have to now consider when it is followed by a haraka instead of a sukoon. So if it is followed by haraka, you now check the letter that comes before it as well. If it is preceded by a haraka as well, then all the qurra will make sila. Lahuma. Lahuma. The ha is preceded by haraka, is followed by haraka, so you make sila. And that is making sila with a waw sakina, because the ha has a dhamma. The ha could have a kasra, it's preceded by kasra or ya sakina, bihi imana, example, then they make sila because it is preceded by haraka and it's also followed by haraka. In this case, sila will be made with a ya sakina. And then if it's preceded by a sukoon, then none of the qurra will make sila except for Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir will be the only one. Therefore, if you hear that application, then you notice Ibn Kathir. Yu'tihi man yasha. Yu'tihi man yasha. The hadi is preceded by a sukoon, by a ya sakina. That's why it has a kasra, and therefore the sila will be made with a ya sakina. Yu'tihi man yasha. Sila will be made only for Ibn Kathir in that example with a ya sakina. الذين اتبعوه رأفة ورحمة. In that example, then sila was made with a waw sakina because it is the ha has a dhamma. Okay, so that was the sila of the ha'ul kinaya that we did in the previous week. Then another application that we had, for example, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. If I read in that way, then which qira'ah is it?
Say.
Yes, it's Kisai because of the imala and the ta marbuta.
Imala on the ta marbuta or the
Before
ta'nif related will be al-Kisai. Okay, then if I read وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرُ وَأَبْقِ وَالْآخِرَةُ, then that will be for whom? It will be for Khalaf and for Khalad because of the application of what?
Sakt between the lam ta'rif
and the Hamza. Okay. If I read out even Man amana billah. Man amana. So that first one, wal akhirah, was for both Khalaf and Khalad. Let's give somebody else a chance.
Okay.
Anybody else besides Mahmoud? If I read man amana, then who will be for? From the Razak?
شيخ خلف.
It will be specifically for Khalaf. والآخر will be for both Khalaf and Khalad. Man amana will be only for Khalaf. If I read manamana, if I read manamana, then who will that be for?
شيخ تلقي ورش.
It would be Warsh, okay, because of the application of Sila. It would be Warsh because of the application of Sila. If I read Basan Shadida, Mahmuda, it will be who?
It will be Susi
It would be
because of the
Susi.
takhfif with badal, with ibdal.
Correct. If I read Fi Huda, Fi Huda,
It will be Susi because of the idgham kabir.
correct. Susi because of the Idgham Kabir. If I read Matwa al-Fajr,
It will be Warsh because of the taghlid made in the lam after the fully
correct. If I read Ikhraja, Ikhraja,
also Warsh because of the tarqiq on the ra because it's a kasra in front of the sakin.
speak of the Ra. If I read Shay'an ittakhadaha,
Also Warsh.
also Warash because of the mad on the lean.
Yeah.
If I read Amanu, also be Warash because of the mad bada. And if I read Khayru wa baqi, Khayru wa baqi would be for Khalaf because of the absence of Ghunna in the Wow. Okay, so those applications we've done so far. Alhamdulillah, you can see in the half of the course that we've done so far. We've covered quite a bit, alhamdulillah. And through those rules, we can actually identify many so far already of the different qira'at. So the lessons going forward will be slightly different in that instead of just having one rule and it's applying just to one qari, so that when you hear that application, you know it will go to that qari. When you hear that application, it will go according to that rawi. Okay, that's what we've been doing so far. We're now looking at the combined applications. And I mentioned right at the very beginning that you don't really find these terms in Qira'at. It's terms I've made up for this particular book. So I've used the word single applications for what we've done so far. We have one application that applies only to one qari or to one rawi, looking only at the Saba'a Qira'at. Now in the combined applications, we're going to have a particular rule. And those of you that have done Tajweed before, you know the chapter on the Sifat. Sifat Lazima and Arida. In the Sifat Lazima, you start with those that are Mutawwada and Khayr Mutawwada. So in those that are Mutawwada, the first category would be Hams and Jahr. So have a particular letter, and it must be in one of those two. It must be either Hams or Jahr. So have a particular letter, and it will fall under the having the quality of Hams or Jahr. So similarly, you can think of it in the same way that we're going to have an application, and then all the Qur'an, they must fit into one of the two ways of doing that application. Doing it in this way or doing it in the other way. Or there could be three options. Then you have option 1, 2, 3 in a particular rule, 3 ways of applying it. Then the Qur'an, they must fit into one of those 3 categories. So now instead of just looking at one qari, we're going to learn a rule and see how does it apply differently. Which of the Qur'an applied in this way, which of the Qur'an applied in a different way. So the lesson is going to become a bit more intricate, inshallah, in terms of the applications. So we are now on chapter 3. Chapter 3, the 7 qira'at. We're still restricting ourselves only to the 7 qira'at. Now we're looking at the combined applications. I'm going to explain what that term means. So we're looking again at mad, and we had this in chapter 1. We started by revising the brief concepts with regard to mad. Then we look specifically at mad badal. where instead of the hamza following the letter of mad, it precedes it. And that was applied with tathlith for warsh. Qasr, tawassud, and tul was applied by warsh in the mad badal. Then we also looked at the second one, the mad leen. It is when, for example, you have the word shay'un, you have a letter of leen followed by hamza in the same word. So we said that the letters of leen resemble the letters of mad, and this is one of those situations where that applies, in that mad can now be made in that because of the hamza following it. Again, that was applied only by warsh. You would have either tawassut or tul. In the mad badal, he has three options: tathlith, qasr, tawassut, and tul. But in the mad leen, he only has two options. He only has tawassut and tul. So because we did that lesson quite long ago, we are again going to revise the general rules of tajweed perhaps with regard to mad. Okay, we did it before, and in that case, we went through it quite in detail, and we went through it using the summaries that I had in the other book. But for now, since we've covered before, we're going to do it again, but just from the notes that we have over here. So as mentioned in part one, the different types of mad are mad lazim, mad adil, mad muttasil, and mad munfasil. And we're going to be looking at them in this particular sequence. Okay, normally when you start them in tajweed, we do it maybe muttasil and munfasil, in mad adil, then mad lazim. But here, because of how the Qurra have differences in the application, we're going to do it in this way, right? From the easy to the more complex in terms of the different variations that you have. So you have mad lazim. Lazim is necessary. So you must apply mad in this. You have to apply mad in this. All the Qurra apply mad in this. When we say apply mad, we mean that you're reading it longer than its intrinsic length. Its intrinsic length for the letters of mad is 2 harakat. U, E, 2 harakat in each one. That's the intrinsic length. You can't have it less than that. Then the letter of mad will not have been recited. So anything longer that would be regarded as mad, and anything longer will fall in either 2 lengths, either 4 harakat, tawassut, ja'a, or 2 6 harakat, walallin. So all the Qurra agree upon making mad in mad lazim. But more than that, they also agree on the length. We said mad is of 2 lengths, tawassut and tul. So they all agree, okay, it must be read with mad. But now furthermore, out of those options of mad, tawassut and tul, they all agree that it must be done with tul. So looking at the 7 qira'at, looking at the 10 qira'at, looking at the 10 kubra, you don't find any variation in the mad lazim. Okay, you'll never find any variation with regard to that. All Qurra will apply mad in it. All Qurra will apply mad furthermore to the length of tul. Example, alif lam. Again, for those of you that have studied tajweed, the different types of mad lazim are harfi and kilmi. Harfi in a letter, the huruf al-muqatta'at, that's the first example. Walallin in a word, that's the second example. In alif lam mim, you have both of the types of mad lazim harfi. You have muthaqqal and mukhaffaf. The lam going into the mim would be muthaqqal, heavy because of the idgham, because of the shadda. The mim at the end would be mukhaffaf because of the sukoon at the end. Okay, with regard to kilmi, we only have one example here. Walallin, that would be muthaqqal because of the shadda on the lam. Then we have mad adil. Mad adil, technically mad adil is sukoon. Mad lazim, necessary, right? Compulsory. Mad adil, temporary. All Qurra have options of reading with qasr, tawassut, and tul in the mad adil is sukoon. Mad adil is sukoon. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, with a harakat at the end, with a kasra on the mim. That is how you read reading through. But when you stop on this word, we don't stop by reading the harakat. You have different options actually in terms of how we're going to stop. But the general one would be waqf bil iskan. The normal way of stopping is waqf bil iskan. So if we put a sukoon there on the mim, when you stop, you don't read the harakat of the kasra on the mim, you read with a sukoon. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So now because of the letter of mad at the end being followed by a sukoon, the sukoon is the cause of the mad here. However, it is temporary. Unlike the sukoon being permanent in the previous one, which was lazim, here it is temporary. So therefore you have options, and all Qurra will have these options, the qasr, tawassut, and tul. That will apply for all the qurra. Qasr, tawassut, and tul. Just on a side note, we said that Warsh has tathlith in the mad badal, qasr, tawassut, and tul. Okay. The difference is when you do the qira'at, yeah, you also have qasr, tawassut, and tul, but this would be optional. You simply need to do only one of them, and that will suffice. You don't have to read and repeat all yourself all the time. But when it comes to Warsh on the mad badal, amanu, right, in order to complete the khatam correctly, you will have to read it over and over and over. You have to do 3 times, qasr, tawassut, and tul. You have to do all 3 different applications. You have the mad muttasil. So this is going to be the first lesson that we're going to have today with regards to the qira'at. You can see in those 2 types of mad, there were no differences amongst the qurra. They all read the same as hafs. Whereas now in the mad muttasil, we're going to have variations. Mad muttasil is when a hamza follows a letter of mad in the same word. For example, ja'a, ji'a, su'a is the alif as the letter of mad. The ya sakina is the letter of mad. The waw sakina is the letter of mad. They're all followed by a hamza in the same word, mad muttasil. So like in the mad lazim, where they all agree on making mad, yeah, all the qurra also agree on making mad. So you won't ever find a qari reading with qasr in these cases over here. When they read the hamza, they will read it always by having mad on the letter of mad preceding it. They will all make mad. But as we mentioned, mad can be of 2 types, tawassut or tul. So this is now the difference between the muttasil and the lazim. In both lazim and muttasil, you have to make mad. This muttasil is a mad wajib. It's a mad wajib, right? This was clarified in the tuhfa for those of you that have studied it. But the qurra differ on the length to which it should be pulled. They differ on how long the mad should be pulled. So all of them are going to pull it, but they're going to differ with regard to either tawassut or tul. Those are the 2 options that they will have differences in. So all the qurra except Warsh and Hamza read with tawassut in mad muttasil, 4 harakat. So that's your normal reading of Hafs. Right, the Shatibiyya, you will have 4 harakat, and almost all the qurra will agree with Hafs and read in the same way. The only exceptions are Warsh and Hamza. The only exceptions are Warsh and Hamza. Okay, and before I scroll down, what will Warsh and Hamza apply then if they're not going to do tawassut?
Tul.
They will do tul. You see here that they agree on making mad. Okay, so if they're not going to do tawassut, but they're going to do mad, then they have to do it to the length of tul. So Warsh and Hamza, on the other hand, will read with tul in the mad muttasil. So in the exercise that we had before, I read it for Warsh many times, I did for Hamza also a few times, and we didn't discuss it yet, but you might have heard that when I applied mad for Warsh, it was always to the length of tul. It was always to the length of tul when applying the mad. Okay, so we didn't cover it before, but you might have heard it being applied before already. So over here, the exercise, I have to highlight those places in which Warsh and Hamza will apply tul in the mad muttasil. So very simple exercise, a very easy one. You just have to find where is the mad muttasil, which is the Hamza being followed by letter of mad in the same word. I'm giving 1 minute only for this. Okay, let's begin. Anybody, the first verse, we would like to apply? Abdullah?
أولئك.
Ulaika. Anybody else, the next one? Asir?
ملائكة.
Ulaika. Anybody else, number 3? Mahmoud?
Sheikh, الماء.
Anybody else? Number 4.
الدماء
دماء. Ikram. Number 5. Ikram.
Comes twice. Okay. والسماء من السماء.
4 times.
Okay.
Others is
Actually, more
منفصل.
times. What about bina'an? Is it muttasil or munfasil?
It's منفصل.
Why?
No. No, it's متصل. المفروض
It's
متصل.
also in one word. It's also muttasil.
4.
Is that all on?
والسماء
You also have in what?
ماء.
Ma'a. Okay, so it actually comes 4 times. Okay, so again, we have the visual cue to help us identify where you need to listen and take note of the difference in application. So Hafs will read all of these mudud over here with 4 harakat, with tawassut. We're going to now do for Warsh and Hamza, and they will both read the same, right? So this reading will apply for both Warsh and Hamza, because they will both apply tool in the Mad Muttasil. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولئك على هدى من ربهم وإذ قلنا للملائكة اسجدوا فيخرج منه الماء وإن منها ويسفك الدماء ونحن والسماء بناء وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به. Okay, so in the last verse especially you can see that when you're reading for these Qur'an you need quite a lot of faith and as well as a lot of patience, because you have to put all these mudud to subhanallah. I said at the beginning that this recitation will apply for Warsh and Hamza, okay, because they both apply to in the Mad Muttasil. If you're looking specifically at the fifth verse now, the last one, with that the recitation that I did, was it for both Warsh and Hamza, yes or no?
No.
Ikram, what do you say?
No.
No, why not?
خلف especially أول أنزله. He does not make غنة.
Just do it in a different color. There's another application over here, which should be idgham bi ghayri ghunna in the wa. So the recitation I did with the ghunna, so it was for Warsh, and also Khalad would have did the same. But Khalaf would have been different. Khalaf would have been without the ghunna in the wa. Okay, so that is how they could have been differentiated in that particular verse, verse 5. But in the others, they would have all did the same. With regard to verse 4, you might think that why am I giving the portion of the verse in this way? Why including the word wanahn at the end? Because obviously now the meaning is not really complete. I mean, it's not complete in all of them. But why didn't I just stop it on the word ad-dima? The reason for that is because when you stop on a word that has a hamza, then hamza will read in a different way. You will have takhfif, a way of making ease in the pronunciation of the hamza, specifically when stopping on them. We're not going to be covering those rules in this book, but just to point out that that's the reason why the exercise is in this way. We don't have the word that has the hamza as being the last word in the verse. I've always added another word at the end. Okay, so we have the recitation now of the surah, and it will just be auditory, no visuals to help you. So we had the recitation for both Warsh and for Hamza, but over here I'm just going to do one of them. Okay, I'm just going to be doing one of them. So the first one, Surah Al-Nasr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. In which word was the application of to? محمودة.
In the first إذا جاء but Sheikh, I don't know, Sheikh made the إمالة the
Correct, right? So there were two changes there from the normal recitation of Hafs. The one was the mad, it was pulled longer, it was pulled to tool, and then correctly as you said, there was imala as well, either ja'a instead of ja'a. So we didn't discuss it in much detail, but we did have a brief note on it with regard to imala. Okay, so if you think about what we did on imala, was it recitation for Warsh or for Hamza? We know, yeah, that because of the tool in ja'a, we've now narrowed it down from the 7 qira'at, we've narrowed it down to at least 2. And again, now this is the difference in this particular chapter. Before, when you heard application, you narrow it down to one qari or to one rawi. Now we don't know exactly which qari it is, but we've narrowed it down from the 7 to 2. It's either Warsh or Hamza. Okay, but if you think closely of what we have done, will it either be Warsh or will it be Hamza? Anybody? Hamza. Okay, so why Hamza and why not Warsh? Anybody? Why Hamza and not Warsh? Okay, somebody's saying there is no tarqiq of the ra, but then in which word are you thinking the tarqiq should have been applied in that particular surah?
No.
And it shouldn't have been tarqiq of the ra in wara'ayt an-nas, because the conditions are not found for the tarqiq. The ra will be read with tarqiq when it's preceded by kasra or ya sakina, which doesn't apply over there. We just go to the note on imala. Okay. We had a note over here that of the 7 qurra, imala is applied primarily by Hamza and Kisai, and to a lesser degree by Abu Amr. So those are the 3 qurra that we're going to apply imala kubra. Okay, so we narrowed it down to Warsh or Hamza based on the application of 2. And then based on this note, we can now identify it actually as being Hamza. Can be identified as being Hamza, not Warsh, because Hamza has imala kubra and Warsh does not. If Warsh applies imala, then it is imala sughra taqleel. So when you hear the A sound, like Ibn Majariha, right, and that will be for one of these 3 qurra over here. Okay, let's do Surah Ma'un. Difference between imala and taqleel. Imala would be musi. Taqleel would be musa. Musi, imala. Musa, taqleel. Okay, but I don't want to go into the application of taqleel. Surah Ma'un. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدع اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. So in which word was the application of to? Ikram?
يراؤون.
Correct. يراؤون, the mad muttasil over there was for tool. Okay, so again, once hearing that, we don't know exactly which qari or rawi it is, but we've narrowed it down. We've narrowed it down, ikram to whom?
حمزة.
Okay, who applies tool in the mad muttasil?
حمزة and ورش.
Hamza and Warsh. So we narrowed it down by hearing two, hearing just that one application, we've narrowed it down to Warsh or Hamza. But then looking at the other rules that we've learned so far, we can actually separate them. You'll know it was Hamza. How do you know, Ikram?
Like Salah, we didn't make the Salah, the lamb food.
Brilliant,
We
mashallah.
did
I did this
Salah, the Warsh.
surah before, when we did the chapter on the Taghlib of the lamb, and there is Salah as Salah for Warsh. Okay, and that was not read. So that will be how you can identify that it was actually Hamza and not Warsh. Okay. But besides that, another way, you can just maybe answer this question by raising your hand. When I read Yura'un, raise your hand if you could hear another change besides the tool in the mud in that particular word. When I read that word, if you could hear another change besides the lengthening of the mud beyond the norm, then raise your hand. I haven't seen any hands going up. Okay, so I'm going to do it again. And now that I've mentioned it, you should try and listen a bit more carefully. Okay, I'm going to read it twice. I'm going to read the word twice and try and see if you can hear a difference in the pronunciation. Yura'un, yura. Can anybody hear a difference in those two applications? Yura'un, yura'un. How do you know?
Sheikh, I think there's tasheel of the Hamza.
Correct, mashallah. I mentioned now before that when you stop on a word that has a Hamza, Hamza will have takhfif in it, reciting it in an easier way. Okay, so it's a very slight difference. Okay, and this shows you the intricacy of qira'at, that you've heard it now multiple times and maybe you even couldn't pick it up. And myself as well, I used to listen to qira'at before actually studying it, and I would listen specifically to Surah Al-Kahf, and I was hearing the application all the time, and I didn't realize it was actually being done until I learned the rules. Then I realized, okay, he's actually applying that over there. Right? Tasheel, we recite the Hamza between a Hamza and a letter of mad. So it's a very slight difference. It's very hard to pick up, and if you're not made aware of it, then you'll probably not notice it. But that's another way of differentiating them, was Tasheel of the Hamza and Yura'un. So that also would identify it as being Hamza and not Warsh. Okay, but if it's sounding a bit too complicated, don't worry. All you need to know for this particular part of the lesson is that when you have a mad muttasil and it is applied longer than tawassut, it's applied to the length of two, then you narrow it down to Hamza and Warsh, Warsh and Hamza. Then you look at the other rules you've done before to try and differentiate between them. Surah Bayyinah is a little bit of a lengthy surah. I'd have liked to read it, but I think maybe let's just move on, and maybe if we have time we can come back to that one. Because in Surah Nasr Ma'un was just the one word, but in Surah Bayyinah there would be more applications of it. Okay, but moving on to the Mad Munfasil. So I told you that all the Qur'an make Mad in Mad Muttasil. Why? Because it is wajib. Whereas in Mad Munfasil it is jaiz, it is permissible. And the Tuhfa mentions that wajib is when you have a Hamza coming after the letter of mad in the same word. واجب إذا جاء همزة بعد مد في كلمة وذا بمتصل يعد. وجائز, it goes on, and it is permissible. وجائز مد وقصر, to either do mad or qasr in fusil. if each one is separated. كل بكلمة, each one in its own word, وهذا المنفصل, and this is منفصل. So when we did the revision before, we said that in the letters of mad, you can either apply qasr, which is not to do mad, or you can apply mad. You can either do qasr, which is not to apply mad, to read it on its intrinsic length, or you can do mad. And if you do mad, then as we saw now, you have two options, the wasut or tul. So with regard to mad munfasil, some of the Qur'an are not going to apply mad. They're not going to apply mad. So that means they're going to read it to how many harakat?
It's 2.
Two
Two harakat. Then there are other Qur'an that within the mad munfasil, they are going to apply mad. They are going to apply mad. So for them, they will pull it to how many harakat? 4 or 6. Unnecessarily only 4. Perhaps by the Shatubiyya, it will be 4. But we said mad could be either tawassut or 2. So when you're applying the mad, it could be either 4 or 6. So in the mad muttasil, we had two applications, either tawassut or 2. But now in the mad munfasil, you can have 3 applications. You can have qasr, those that don't make mad. Then those that do make mad will either be tawassut, the second option, or 2, the third option. So the Qur'an differ with regard to making mad in mad munfasil. Some of them applied mad, while others do not. That is, they read with qasr. So they read on its intrinsic length of 2 harakat without any extra pull. Regarding those who do apply mad, some apply tawassut, while others apply 2. Some are going to read it 4 harakat, others are going to apply it 6. Like I said, we have this application, mad munfasil. Now you must figure out where the Qur'an fit in. You have qasr, tawassut, and 2. And like before, there were 2 options, now you have 3. So out of those 3, you need to know where does the qari fit in. Does it do qasr, or does it do tawassut, or does it do 2? You must have one of those 3 applications. So we're starting with qasr. The following qurra will apply qasr, Qalun, Ibn Kathir, Duri, and Susi. So we go in sequence, right? If we go back to the very first lesson, we went through and we learned all the names of the qurra and the ruwat, and we did it in a particular sequence, right? So we mentioned them as they appear in that sequence. The first have Qalun. So here has qasr. Then you have Warsh, but it doesn't have qasr, so it's not mentioned here. Then you have Ibn Kathir. It does have qasr, so it's mentioned over here. After Ibn Kathir, who is the next qari after Ibn Kathir?
Abu Amr al-Basri.
Abu Amr. And his 2 rawis are whom?
Duri and Susi.
Duri and Susi, and they are mentioned here. You have Duri as the 3rd one, Susi as the 4th one. So technically, I could have just put here Abu Amr. I could have just put here Abu Amr because that will automatically include both Duri and Susi. So why did I do it in this way? It's because of what I've mentioned here in the brackets. It says Qalun in one wajh, Duri Basri in one wajh. And somebody asked this question before, what is a wajh? A wajh is one particular way of reading. Okay. So therefore, in this application of mad munfasil, you have the 3 options, qasr, tawassut, and 2, and you're going to see that Qalun will have 2 ways of reading. Qalun will have 2 ways of reading. You can see he has qasr, then he also has tawassut as his other wajh. Okay, and that's why I did it here by separating Duri from Susi, because here's one way that the rawis of Abu Amr are differentiated in the mad munfasil, that in qasr, then it will be both Duri and Susi. But if it's tawassut, then it's only Duri. Right? Susi does not have tawassut. Only Duri of the rawis of Abu Amr will have tawassut. Okay, so Qalun in his other wajh will have tawassut 4 harakat. Duri Basri, his other way of reading, his other wajh, he will also have tawassut. Then Ibn Amir will be the next qari, Asim, which is both Hafs and Shu'bah. Right? So Hafs, the normal way of reading, falls in over here. Falls in under Asim, he will also have tawassut. And Kisa'i, he will also have tawassut. Okay, so if you think of qasr, you're thinking of these 4 qurra. If you think of tawassut, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 names. Not necessarily qurra, some of them are ruwat, some of them are qurra, but these 4 names, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 names over here. Okay. Over here, I've specified Duri Basri. Why did I add the part Basri at the end? Why do you think I've added Basri at the end? Okay.
Kisai also, Sheikh.
So also have Duri as being the rawi of Kisai. Okay. So in general, if we just say Duri, then it automatically will be Duri Basri, the Rawi of Abu Amr, because he's the one that comes first. Okay, so if it's mentioned without any specification, which is going to appear later, then you must know it's referring to Duri Basri. But here, just for added clarity, I've added in Duri Basri. Okay, so under Kisai, you'll also have Duri coming in as Duri Kisai or Duri Ali. Why Duri Ali? Because Kisai's name is Ali. Then we have the following Qira applying to Warsh and Hamza. And what do you notice over here? That what did they do in the Mad Muttasil? Warsh and Hamza. How long did they pull the Mad Muttasil? 2, 6 harakat. So they have the same in both Muttasil and Munfasil. In Muttasil, 6. In the Munfasil, also 6. So you're going to have, as I said, a lot of breath that you require when you're reading for Warsh and for Hamza. 2 in all the Madud. In the Lazim, in the Muttasil, in the Munfasil. Okay, so in the previous chapter we did Muttasil. Now we've looked at Munfasil. And obviously in a verse, you're going to have both of them. Even in a single word, you're going to see, you can have both a Mad Munfasil and a Muttasil in a single word. So how will they now combine? Okay, you can figure it out, but I've specified it here for you in the table. You have Mad Munfasil, Mad Muttasil. So the first option in the Mad Munfasil is to do Qasr, which is to read with 2 harakat, right? And those are two harakat, right? We have only 2 options in the Mad Muttasil, which is Tawassut and Tul. And those that did Tul were Warsh and Hamza. And they are not included amongst those that do Qasr. So therefore, those that do Qasr in the Munfasil, they will have to do Muttasil as being 4 harakat. So we've got Qalun, Ibn Kathir, Duri, and Susi. Those are the 4 names that we had before in the Munfasil. Yeah, we're just showing you that what do they apply in the Muttasil, so that you can see it clearly. They have 4 harakat in the Muttasil. So I made a slight change over here, right? I'm editing the document, refining it as we go along. So I've underlined Duri and Qalun over here, which you don't have in your documents. So if you have both the book, you can maybe just do this. I think it just makes it nice. So you can see Qalun Duri. Those are the 2 that have different options. Whereas Ibn Kathir, Susi, they only come once. Ibn Amir, Asim, Kisai, they only come once. So you can clearly see it's underlined Qalun Duri. Those are the 2 that come twice. They have 2 options in the Mad Munfasil. The next option in the Mad Munfasil is to do 4 Tawassut, pull it to 4 harakat. So those are 2 Munfasil as 4. They will also have the Muttasil as being 4. And it will be Qalun, Duri, Ibn Amir, Asim, Kisai. So basically, these 4 names over here, they're in the first row in the table. And in these 5 names over here, they're in the next row in the table. And Warsh and Hamza, they're in the last row. They will have Tul in both, Munfasil and Muttasil. Okay, so this is the combination of Muttasil and Munfasil. As I said at the beginning, the lesson is going to become more intricate, more complicated, alhamdulillah. So now I have to combine and think of the different applications. If you're 2 and 4, then it's one of these 4. If you're in 4 and 4, which is the normal reading of Hafs, then it's one of these 5. Then if you have 6 and 6, then it will be one of these 2. So again, you don't know exactly who the Qari is, but you'll narrow it down. From the 7 Qira'at, from the 14 Ruwat, you'll narrow it down to 4. If you hear this 2 and 4. From the 7 Qira'at, if you have 4 and 4, you'll narrow it down to these 5. And if you have 6 and 6, you'll narrow it down to these 2. Then you must think of the other rules you've done before. Like we did in the previous exercise. You must think of the other rules you've done before in order to differentiate them. So for example, if you had 2 and 4, how can you identify Ibn Kathir as being different from Qalun, Duri, and Susi? What rule did we do that was specific for Ibn Kathir?
The Hal Kinaya.
Al-Kinaya.
The Sila of the Hal Kinaya. So if you hear that, in addition to Qasr in the Mad, then you know it's Ibn Kathir. How can we differentiate Susi from the other 4? Okay.
Idgham
Kabir.
Idgham Kabir. What else? We did another rule. Ibdal of the Hamza Sakina into letter of Mad. Okay. So we didn't do anything specific for Qalun and Duri. So you have to try and listen for the applications of Ibn Kathir or Susi. Looking at those are 2, 4, and 4. Again, we didn't do anything specific for Qalun, Duri, Ibn Amir, Asim, but we did something specific for Kisai. We had one rule that applied only to Kisai. So how can you differentiate Kisai from these others, from these other four?
إمالة بتاع مربوطة.
Correct. Imala of the ta marbuta. Okay. Then we have Warush and Hamza. So if you have tool and tool in both mudud, that means you narrow it down to these two. And yeah, there's quite a lot of differences. Okay, so looking specific at Hamza, how can we identify Hamza as being different from Warush? What rule did we do that was specific for Hamza?
تقول شيخ
Ghunna, without ghunna in what?
نظام
In which letters?
في عندما
The ya and the waw. But that is specifically for which rawi of Hamza?
خلاص.
Or Khalaf. So there you won't now narrow it down to Hamza. You actually narrow it down further to which rawi of him it would be Khalaf. Okay. What other rule did you do that was specific for Hamza?
Sakt.
We had sakt. If you had sakt, then it is narrowing it down to Hamza. And again, there's different applications. You can narrow it down further based on that to find out whether it will be Khalaf and Khalad, if possible. Then for Warsh, there were a number of ways you can identify it. Okay, I'll just do it myself. You have the Taghlib of the lam, the Raqiq of the ra, the Mad Badal, the Mad Lean, and the Naql. In the first chapter we did, there were 5 applications that were unique to Warsh. That's why I said Warsh will be the easiest to identify. Another way now of narrowing him down is to look at the Mudud tool in both Munfasil and Muttasil. Again, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with all of this, you think it's a bit much, then don't worry. The lesson that you actually want to focus on is just on the Mudud. Okay, just on the Mudud. Okay, so 2 and 4, for these 4, Qalun, Ibn Kathir, Duri, and Susi. Qasr and Tawassut. Tawassut in both of them for Qalun, Duri, Ibn Amir, Asim, and Kisai. And Tul in both of them for Warush and Hamza. So you have to identify both them at Munfasil and them at Muttasil. Okay, so normally I just say highlight and I don't mention any color, and I've been using yellow as the default. But then when I wrote this up, I thought to use the primary colors, red, green, and blue. But I did it once before and the red was a bit dark, which didn't look so nice. I'm going to change red to yellow. Basically, you can use any color that you prefer. But in this exercise, when I do it on the screen, I'm now going to be using yellow for the Munfasil and green for the Muttasil. Okay. So how do you identify the difference? Munfasil, they are separated, each one in its own word. You have the letter of Mad in one word, the Hamza in the word that comes after it. Muttasil, both of them are in one word. That means joined. Muttasil is joined, both in one word. So the Hamza and the letter of Mad, they come together after each other in one word. Okay, so this one will be a bit long. I'm giving you maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And there will be multiple occurrences in one verse, not necessarily just going to be one. In the previous exercise, it was mostly just once, but in the last verse, I had more than one. Yeah, you need to check in each verse, is there just one or is there more than one? Additionally, to help you, I've copied this text from how it is actually written in the Mus'haf. So in the Mus'haf, they've added the Mudud symbols to show you where the mad will apply. So you can look for the mad symbol. And that will tell you where it's going to happen. And then you might just think now, at that mad symbol, is it either Muttasil or Munfasil? See, somebody is starting to give the answers already in the chat. So maybe we can begin, inshallah. Just to make it a bit easier for myself in terms of doing it here on the screen, we're going to be having different colors. So instead of me having to change the color all the time, right? I'm just going to be using the one color and doing all the verses. So we're going to do the Mad Munfasil in yellow. So we can go through all the verses, and I'm going to ask you to reply, but just give me the Mad Munfasil. Give me only the Mad Munfasil, if it applies in that particular verse. So Abdullah, the first verse, is the Mad Munfasil, and if yes, then where?
Yes, ila.
Ila. Right? That's the letter of Mad in the one word. The next word has a Hamza. I'm just going to highlight the Hamza as well. Okay, the second verse, anybody else? Is there yes or no? And if yes, then we.
It's the Sheikh, the Ya.
Okay, correct. MashaAllah. So for some of you, it might be confused here. You can see that it's written as one. Ya ayyuha is written as one word. Okay, but it is regarded as two. The word Ya is the munada, to call out. Ya Adam, Ya Ibrahim, Ya ayyuhan nas. So that Ya is a word on its own. It's just written in the Quran as joined to whatever comes next. So even though it's written in the Quran as joined, technically it's regarded as two separate things. So that would be a mad munfasil, not a mad muttasil. The third verse, Ikram.
إنا أوحينا.
Two here. Inna awhayna ilayk. Okay, both of them. What else is there? Tanzil ar-Rahman, are you there? Can you do number 4? Ayub, number 4.
كلما.
Kullama. Okay, that will be the only mad munfasil here. The other one would be the muttasil. Nasir, number 5.
Number 5, Mausha, would be the ha, Sheikh.
Correct, right? Again, here, ha'ula is one word. Okay, but the ha is for at-tanbih, to draw attention to it. So the ha, like you have the ya, is regarded as being separate. So this one here, the ha'u, that's munfasil. But the next part would be muttasil. Rais Matthews, number 6. Rais, if you're there. Number 6. If you can't come on the mic, you can type in the chat. قالوا أتجعل. Okay, قالوا أتجعل is another mad, but that would be muttasil. Okay, number 7, Mahmouda. Number 7. Your mic is muted, Mahmouda. Number 7.
Oh, number 7, Bani. And then
Yeah,
Allati.
Bani.
That is the
Sheikh,
munfasil. Bani is a munfasil and Allati is munfasil and then Isra is muttasil.
Correct. Okay. Amra, number 8.
La. The first
The first
la.
one is la. Next one.
The second la.
Okay, the second la. Is that all?
No, and the third one.
We use the third one.
هؤلاء وما يضلل الله. Before وما يضلل الله.
Okay, that la at the end would be muttasil. The other munfasil is in ha. Right, you can see in verse 5 at ha'ula'i. So the same thing over here. The ha in that, the ha is regarded as separate. Okay, so that would be the munfasil. So we've identified now on the munfasil, so all the remainders would be the muttasil. So just to quickly do that. First one, only had one. Yeah, Allah. Okay, did I miss out anything? I think I've got everything. So you can see here the first few verses only have the munfasil, which is the lesson that we're currently busy with. Then from 4, we now combine them, the munfasil and the muttasil. So it goes from the easy to slightly more complicated. So we're going to read with qasr, then with tawassut, then with tul. That's the sequence that we're going. Because we start with qalun, and qalun has 2 awjuh. He first does qasr, and then he does tawassut. Right? And then we read and finish those at tul. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويوم القيامة يردون إلى أشد العذاب إلى أشد العذاب. So to save time, I'm not going to go back to the beginning, just to where the changes. The only changes here on إلى, so I'm just going to start over there. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم إنا أوحينا إليك إنا أوحينا إليك إنا أوحينا إليك. So in those 3 verses, when I did qasr, then who did it apply for? Ikram?
Applied for Ibn Kathir and first wajab Qalun, first wajab Tur in Basra.
Oh, first wajh of Turi, and who else?
Qalun, first wajab Qalun.
And who else? You missed
Ibn
out one.
Kathir.
You're missing out
Ibn
somebody.
Kathir.
Besides Ibn Kathir.
First one.
Also Susi.
So,
Susi also has qasr. Okay. Somebody else, when I did the tawassut, in the recitation of tawassut, applied to whom? As you can see, it's not so easy now. You can't just say one name, one qari. You have to now think of multiple Qur'an. Sheikh Abdul Razak?
شيخ تواصل شيخ قالون دوري
Yes.
بن عمرو عاصم الكسائي.
Correct, right? And when I did the two, that is for Warosh and for Hamza. Okay. Fourth verse. كلما أضاء لهم كلما أضاء لهم كلما أضاء لهم. So you have qasr and tawassut. Then reading both the same, tawassut in both, and then tul in both. Okay, so you don't have very many combinations. You only have actually possibility of 3 combinations. Okay, so again, those that did qasr, they will be mentioned here when you're reading with the tawassut on the second part. And then again, the same names will apply to tawassut in both, and Warsh and Hamza will have tul in both. And the same in the next verse. هؤلاء تقتلون أنفسكم هؤلاء تقتلون أنفسكم هؤلاء تقتلون أنفسكم قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن. That last wajh was for whom? Mahmouda?
Warsh, because Sheikh didn't make, Sheikh made غنة يا من يفسد. Hamza would have not made غنة.
Okay, you have identified the differentiation, but there's something a bit incorrect in that Hamza on may yufsidu,
only Khalad.
it will be different for Khalaf and Khalad. So that recitation was for Warsh and for Khalad. It was for Warsh and for Khalad, but then Khalaf was left out because he would read قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم. So the last wajh with 2 is for Warsh and for Hamza. If you look in the word Israel, you have the mad muttasil, you have the ra, the alif followed by the Hamza. But if you're looking at the next part, you have the Hamza and then the ya sakina that follows it. So the Hamza preceding the letter of mad is what type of a mad?
Sapadal.
Mad badal. Mad badal. The Hamza preceding the Mad is mad badal. And Nasir, what does Warsh have in the mad badal?
In the mad paddle, it is either tawasud tu.
Qasr or Tawassud or Tu. Three options. Qasr, Tawassud or Tu. So how come I didn't repeat and do the Tawassud and the Tu? Anybody? Has been paying very close attention to the notes and to the lessons.
Because it's only Warsh that does.
Yeah, but I did now for Warsh. So when I was reading for Warsh, why didn't I repeat and do the Tawassud and the Tu? As I said, for Warsh, whenever you have a mad battle, you must repeat. You must do all the three ways. So how come I didn't do it over here? Yes, Nasir?
I think it was to keep all the lengths consistent, Sheikh.
Okay, no, that's not the reason. Okay, you can go back and check. I don't blame if you missed it out, but that was one of the exceptions. There was a note on just a few exceptions, right, for Warsh, and Israel is one of those exceptions. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned it in the notes or not, but you can maybe check. But basically, Israel is an exception for the mad battle. It doesn't have tathlith in that word Israel. Okay. My apologies if I didn't mention it in the notes. Number 8, okay. Take note here that in this one word is going to be, as I said, the munfasil and the muttasil. Okay, so they need to be differentiated when doing qasr and read the same in doing the tawassut. لا إله هؤلاء ولا إله هؤلاء ومن يضلل الله لا إله هؤلاء ولا إله هؤلاء ومن يضلل الله لا إله هؤلاء ولا إله هؤلاء ومن يضلل الله. So the last one was for Khalaf, because it is differently in the Nun Sakina into the Ya. Okay. And again, you can see how much breath you need, subhanAllah, for reading Warsh and for reading Hamza. We've really gone beyond our time. So maybe I'll just do Surah Kafirun over here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. Anybody can identify which riwayah was that? Abdullah?
Warsh, Sheikh, because he recited the raw flat. Kafirun.
Okay. So firstly, I was hoping that I said because of the mad. In the mad there was two, right? But would have not given you exactly who to have identified it as being either Warsh or Hamza. And then it was a bit slight difference, but Kafirun, correct, was read with Tarqiq. So that would make it clear that it's Warsh and not Hamza. Okay, so that is for those that do two. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. Okay, let's give somebody else a chance here. So I'm not asking you which riwayah, but looking at the application of the mad, you have qasr, tawassut, or tul. So what was applied in the mad? Qasr, tawassut, or tul? Mahmoud?
قصر.
So who are those that make qasr?
Ja, guys, sorry, guys. Ibn Kathir. Guys, Santo, my sister Ibn Kathir, because she had a sila. And no,
Okay, but I'm just asking about those that make qasr in the mad. Who are those all that make qasr?
قالون Ibn Kathir, Turin, Susi.
Correct. So by listening to the application of qasr in the mad, we don't know exactly what it is, but we've at least identified it as being one of those. Qalun, narrowed down to Qalun, Ibn Kathir, Duri, and Susi. And great, mashallah, we're going to do it in the next lesson, inshallah. We're going to do the sila. So the sila of the meme would now be how you can identify it as being Ibn Kathir. However, you're going to see that Qalun also has that. So there's a different application that would have made it clear that it's Ibn Kathir. Okay, but let's just leave it at that.
Can I ask?
Let me just read the next one. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. لكم دينكم ولي دين. So what is applied in the mad? Qasr, tawassut, or tul? Yes, Mahmoud.
توسط.
Tawassut. Sheikh Abdul Razak. So who reads with tawassut? Sheikh Abdul Razak. Your mic is muted.
Yes, Sheikh. I was struggling with the mic, Sheikh. It's Qalun, Duri, Ibn Amr, and Asim al-Kisai.
Correct. Right. So we don't know exactly what it is, but we've narrowed it down from the Sabah to those particular individuals. And we haven't covered the rules to identify exactly who it is. Well, because this would be a farshi change. Okay, so we're not going to cover it at all. But you might have heard the imala in Ibiduna, and that is specific for Hisham. That is specific for Hisham. So that is how you can identify possibly as being Hisham. But you wouldn't be able to know that based on what we've learned in the course so far. So, alhamdulillah, most times we actually managed to finish within an hour. Just today we went a little bit over time. So you can listen to the recitation of the others by listening on the application. You can click the link. You can scan the QR code if you have the book, and then listen to the other applications, right? And you can now choose which qari you want to listen to. I haven't specified here, because now the lesson we did today covers all the different qurra, right? Some of them apply qasr, some of them apply tawassut, some of them apply tul in the mad munfasil. In the mad muttasil, Warsh and Hamza will apply tul, the others will apply tawassut. Which riwayah does a student begin with when reciting for the different qira'at? Do you mean when reciting for all the 7 at the same time, or when doing them individually?
Individually, Sheikh.
Then it's up to the student, or possibly up to the teacher. You can do any qira'ah first. You don't have to go in a particular sequence. For example, for myself, when I did a qira'ah, the first one I did after Hafs was Kisa'i. I did Kisa'i first, even though he's the last of the 7 qira'at. Okay. So there's no particular sequence that you need to stick to in terms of doing the qira'at. But when you do the jam, when you read all 7 at the same time, then you must go in sequence. When you read all at the same time, you start with Qalun, and then the next one, the next one, the next one, in the sequence that is given. I think somebody answered the question, Ikram, or anybody else?
I just want to clarify, Sheikh, on Lakum Dinukum. Is
Yes.
it like Sheikh said, follow the Farsi change? Is it that
Yes,
because of
it
Ibn
is.
Kathir and Qadun is lakum dinukum walidi?
Yes, you have
Qadun.
walidin and waliyadin. And it's actually discussed under the usul. And the difference is actually mentioned under usul. But you can think of it as being part of the farsh, because you have to look individually at the particular verses. Where do they read it with a fatha? Where do they read it with a sukun? So you'll find this discussion under the usul in the Shatibiyya. But yes, it can be regarded as part of the farsh, because it's specific to a particular verse. There's no qaida or precept that it is based on. So I read incorrectly the first time when I was reading for Hisham. I read walidin, because that's how most of them actually read. But I was just thinking about it, and I need to check it up. But I think it's actually waliyadin, like Hafs. I think it is actually waliyadin. Okay, we're in there. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم